Deep diving into Edda Poems with Maria Kvilhaug. Episode 49. The Bride of the Burial Mound. Helgi's Death and Reincarnation. The Poems of Helgi Hundingsbani 12. The Reincarnating Valkyria / Helgi Poems 21. A lecture series on Patreon by Maria Kvilhaug. Welcome back to this deep diving into Edda Poems with yours truly. The last 3 episodes presented my translations of the first poem of Helgi Hundingsbani, then the poem of Helgi Hjörvardsson, and the second poem of Helgi Hundingsbani. Now we shall return back to our discussions of these poems, looking at the final verses of the second poem of Helgi Hundingsbani. The last verses of the first poem were presented and discussed in episode 45, the Battle of the Rock of Greed, and of course in the recital episode 46, where I recited the entire first poem of Helgi Hundingsbani. The first poem ends with Helgi's victory at the Rock of Greed, and the Valkyria descending from heaven to consecrate the victors and declare that Helgi has earned herself the rika mær, the powerful maiden, alongside the mysterious red rings. The second poem, on the other hand, presented in full in episode 48, continues the story after Helgi's victory. Sigrun walks the battlefield and finds Helgi and weeps when she learns that he has killed her father and one of her brothers. He comforts her. Her surviving brother, Dagur, pledges allegiance to Helgi. Sigrun and Helgi are married and they have sons. Helgi fick Sigrunar och 8 söner. Helgi had Sigrun and they had sons together. Where the first poem emphasizes Sigurðr as a Valkyria, a sort of goddess walking the earth in human flesh. The second poem paints Sigurd's role as far more human-like. She is still a Valkyria, a goddess born in human incarnation, but her humanity is emphasized more in this version of the narrative, the second poem of Helgi Hundingsbani. So today we are going to go through the last 20 or so verses of the second poem of Helgi Hundingsbani, and we will begin where we left off, at the prose interlude between verses 29 and 30, the second poem after the battle at the Rock of Greed. So we are continuing after episode 45, the battle at the Rock of Greed. Var Helgi eigi gamal, Dager Høgnason blotad I Odin til fødur hefnda. Blotad I Odin. Odin led I dag Geirs sin. Odin led I dag. Dager fann Helga måg sin. Dar sem heiter at Fjøturlundi. Han lagde I gøgnom Helga med Geirnum. Dar fell Helgi en dager reid til Sefafjalla og sagði Sigrunu tidindi. Helgi did not grow old, var Helgi eigi gamal. Dager Høgnis son, Sigruns brother, sacrificed to Odin for father vengeance. Blotad I Odin til fødur hefnda. Odin let Dager borrow his spear. Odin led Geirs sin. Dager found Helgi, his brother-in-law, in that place known as the Fette Grove. Fjøturlundi. He pierced through Helgi with the spear. There fell Helgi, and Dager rode to the Mountain of Souls, to tell these tidings to Sigurðr. The prose interlude before verse 30 summarizes how Helgi died. It begins by stating that Helgi var eigi gamal. He did not grow old. As in, he died young. The reason for his early departure from life was his brother-in-law, Dager Høgnason. We recall that Sigrun's father was named Høgni, which I have interpreted as enclosure, although it is a name which could allude to both protection, fence, and enclosed space, but also to capacity, skill, skillfulness, and even thinking, as in the mind. Now, this Høgni, enclosure, had two sons, Sigrun's two brothers, Bragi, poetry, and Dager, which means day. As we learned in episode 42, The Maiden of Enclosure, Sigrun's father and brothers had earlier made an alliance with Granmar and his sons at a king's parliament, and to seal the deal, they had promised Sigrun in marriage to Höðbroddur Granmar's son. But Sigrun had fled from her own family and asked Helgi to save her from this unwanted marriage. He had agreed. Helgi, claiming the bride that had been promised to another, was the cause of war between the parties, and it had made Sigrun's beloved Helgi into the enemy of her own father and brothers. Fellu I morgun at freka steini, Bragi och Høgni, var det ekbani deira. In verse 26, the second poem, Helgi had to give the sad news to his bride. Although they had won, she had lost a father, Høgni, and a brother, Bragi. And the worst was that both Høgni and Bragi had died at the hands of Helgi himself. Vard ek bani deira. I was their bane, he reveals regretfully, and Sigrun weeps. Dar var orrusta Mikael, och fällu aller granmars syner, och aller deira höftingar, nema Dager Högnason, fick grid, och vann eida völsungum. There was a great battle, and they felled all the sons of Grand Ocean, and all their chieftains, except they, Enclosure's son, who was given truce, and who swore oaths to the Völsungar. In the prose interlude before verse 26, we learn that Helgi and his men felled Granmar, all his sons, and also all their chieftains, with one exception, Dager Högni's son, who was given truce and who swore oaths to the wandlings, the Völsungar. We went through this part in episode 45, the battle at the Rock of Greed. He had sworn oaths, Dager, but no pledge could be stronger or overrule his allegiance to his own family. He was honor-bound to avenge his father and brother. Dager was torn between two contradicting pledges. To overcome the internal conflict of allegiance, Dager sought the gods. He made sacrifice to Odin. He blotade Odin till föderhäfnda, for father vengeance föderhäfnda. Odin approved and let Dager borrow his own spear. Odin's spear is Gungnir, the swaying one, indicating something that moves from side to side or that vibrates. As Rudolf Simek points out in his Dictionary of Northern Mythology, the oldest mention of this spear is found in a 9th century skaldic poem by a skald known as Bragi in Gamli, Bragi the Old. So this is a poem from the 800s, deep pagan times, where the poet referred to the god Odin by the kenning Gungnis vårfuder, which means Gungnis shaker, Odin, the shaker of the swaying one. I would add a deeper meaning. Odin is here the divine power that causes the vibrating movement of a piercing force, a spear, called the swaying one. The 10th century skald Egil Skallagrimson refers to Odin as Geir's Drottin, the spear's lord, lord of the spear, in his poem Sonatorrek, while the 10th century skald Kormaker Ögmundarson described how Hroptr, the shattered one, heiti for Odin, for med, that is advanced with, the spear Gungnir, ford med Hroptr Gungni, in his poem Sigurðr dråpa. In the Skaldskaparmål, Snorri Sturluson tells a tale of how Odin received this spear from Loki, although it had been forged by the sons of the dwarf Ivaldi. It would always hit exactly where he aimed. In the Ynglinga Saga 9, both Odin and Njörður mark themselves with a spear to dedicate themselves to Odin. And in the Edda poem Håvamål, Odin is pierced by spear as he hangs on the tree to achieve sacred knowledge. Also, the Völva Gullveigr is pierced by spear in what may be Odin's hall when she is burned and resurrects, conquering death 3 times. In a famous story about King Vikar, told by Saxo Grammaticus, and in the Gautrek saga, a casting of lots demand that the king, Vikar, be sacrificed to Odin to save his ships from being stranded. Since he is king, they decide to only make a mock sacrifice, where Vikar is hanged and stabbed, but only seemingly. Instead of rope, they use entrails from a beast, and instead of spear, they use soft twigs. But as the mock sacrifice is taking place, the entrails used to hang King Vikar and the twigs used to stab him magically turn into real rope and real spears, so that the king indeed dies, given to Odin. Apart from being associated with sacrifice to Odin, or to Odin's own journey of transformation and wisdom, the spear he wields, which always hits true, is used, as Ynglinga saga describes, to choose warriors for Odin. Whoever is hit by Odin's spear is chosen by the god for Valhalla, where the chosen warriors, the Einherji, are resurrected from death with sacred mead, and may join the gods in the final battle against the destructive and greedy powers of Ragnarök, when the rulers are shattered. And now Odin's spear, carried by Grógaldr, is aimed at Helgi. Grógaldr is granted his vengeance, and Odin gets Helgi for his whole. The killing of Helgi takes place in a sacred grove, the Fjörlundr. This means fetter grove. Groves were natural temples or shrines, places of worship. The word fjörtur is a term for fetter, iron bond or chain, and any word for bond, fetter or chain could be used as a heiti, a cover name for God. As Snorri Sturluson explained in his treatise on traditional poetry, the Skaldskaparmál, chapter 68, Goda heiti, cover names of the gods. When Grógaldr goes to the fetter grove, it means that he went to a temple of a god, or of the gods. This is where Helgi finds his end, pierced by Odin's spear in the temple of the gods, as if he was in truth sacrificed to Odin, a very honorable end. The images shown in the video representation of this lecture are 1. Bronze Age rock carvings of men or gods wielding spears from Tanum in Sweden. Some have been interpreted as possible early forms of the spear god, Odin. 2. A reconstruction drawing with color of a fragment from a woven tapestry found in the 834 AD Oseberg ship burial by Professor Marianne Wedeler at the Norwegian Museum of Cultural History. That is, she has reconstructed this tapestry. It appears to show a serpentine grove where 9 men are hanging, presided over by 3 women figures. 3. A scene from a 6th century memorial stone from Gotland, Sweden, showing a sacrifice. A group of men carrying swords and shields appear to arrive with a large bird for sacrifice. 2 men seem to be sacrificing a smaller man on an altar. Above is a symbol often referred to today as the Valknuter, which often appears in art from this era. 3 triangles intertwined and pointing downwards to the altar. And above that flies a large bird, an eagle perhaps. Behind the altar, a man wearing a shield is hanging from a tree. And 4, the last one, is an image of Odin at Hegge, which is a wooden Odin mask carved out in the roof of the medieval stave church at Hegge, Innlandet, Norway, showing the god with only one eye and a strange expression in his face, tongue out, eyes wide, well, one of his eyes wide. Var fell Helgi, en dager reid til Sefafjalla, og sagði Sigurðr tíðindi. There fell Helgi, and Dager rode to the mountain of souls, to tell these tidings to Sigurðr. Traudur mek syster, trega at sega, því at ek hefi naudiger nifti gretta. Fell I morgun, und Fjøturlundi, budelunger, så var bester I heimi, og Hildingum og Halsi stod. Dager said to Sigrun, his sister, sad am I, sister, this grief to tell you, that I have unwillingly made weep my kinswoman, fell in the morning by the fette grove, the royal one who was the best in the world, and who on the warrior's neck could stand. In verse 30, Dager travels from the grove of the gods to the mountain of souls, Sefafjall, where Sigrun now dwells. Sefi was a term for the dead, for relatives, for kinsmen, associated with the term Sif for kinswoman, and also for souls. In Christian medieval literature, Sefi became a word for soul. Sefa is a plural genitive form. So the meaning of this mountain has also been associated with sleep, from sofa to sleep, or sveffen, sleep, and thus also with death. Although this association must ignore the term Sefi for relative or dead relative, soul. And such an interpretation must be based on Sigrun's association to her previous incarnation, Svofa, and to Svofa land, and Svofnir, all names that could have to do with sleep. I have evidently chosen the term Sefi for soul or dead people, dead relatives perhaps. So it has become Mountain of Souls, Sefafjall, in my translation. Sefafjall is mentioned as Sigrun's original homestead and is often used to create letter rhyme with her name, Sigrun fra Sefafjallum, 2 S's. Sigrun from the Mountain of Souls. In the second poem, this happens in verses 25, 36, 42, 45 and 48. So the term Sigrun from Sefafjall is mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. In the first poem, the place is not mentioned at all. Sigrun comes from above, from the sky, from heaven, and the only time she comes from a mountain the mountain is referred to as the Logafjöll, the mountain of flames. But in the second poem, she is consistently referred to as Sigurðr from the mountain of the Sefi, that is the dead relatives of the souls. Grógaldr seeks his Valkyria sister in her mountain abode and reveals what he has done. He assures her that he never wanted to harm her and make her weep, but that he has killed her husband. He adds a praise to the dead Helgi that he was the best in the world, worthy of standing on the neck of other warriors. Sigurðr, however, does not take kindly to his attempts to placate her. Let us hear verse 31. Sigurðr kvað: Vekk skyli aller eidar bita, Þeir helga haftir unna, at Hyndluljóð leiftrar vatni, og at ursvölum unnar stein. Sigurðr said, You should every oath be biting, those oaths you had to Helgi sworn, by the bright water of lightning, and by the original cold stone of the wave, In verse 31, Sigurðr casts a curse against her brother. He had sworn oaths to her husband, Helgi, and now she wishes that the oaths come to bite him, the oath breaker. She curses him by the water of lightning, leiftrar vatn, and by the stone of Unnur. Unnur could mean wave and poetically also a woman. Other than that, I have no obvious explanation for neither place, but Sigurðr uses these to curse her brother by, to give weight and power to her curse. The water of lightning and the stone of the woman or the stone of the wave. The curse continues in the next 2 verses. She's really angry with her brother. Skriði that ski, hún there skriði, þótt óskabir eftirleggisk. Renni så marr, hún there renni, þótt du fjöndur þína fordask eigir. Sigurðr curses her brother, Grógaldr. The ship shall not sail which sails with you on, even if a wish wind blows in your favor. The horse shall not run which runs beneath you, even if your enemies are pursuing closely. In verse 32, her curse includes how his ship shall not sail even if he has óskabir, the wish wind, as in the best wind one could dream of, and that his horse shall not run even if enemies are close. And the curse continues. Verse 33. Bit der that sverd, du bregdir, nema sjálfum þér syng vi of hefti. Då væri þér hefnd helga dauda, ef du værir varger og vidum uti, auds andvani og alls gamans, heftir eigi mat, nema og hræjum springer. The sword shall not bite when you wield it, unless directed at yourself it sings about your head. Then would be avenged the death of Helgi, if you be a warg straying out in the forest, and of abundance spirit lacking, and lacking of all pleasure, possessing no nourishment, except corpses to devour. In verse 33, her curse continues with a wish for his sword to not bite when he wields it, and only when he has become an outcast, a warg in the forest, lacking in abundance, pleasure, and proper nourishment, she declares. Only then will Helgi be sufficiently avenged. And this is when Grógaldr intervenes with a plea in verse 34. Grógaldr kvað. Du syster, og vita. Du bræður þínum bider forskap. Ein velder Odin, bølvi. Þrí at med sifjungum sak runar bar. Grógaldr said, deluded are you, sister, and out of your mind, when you on your own brother commands such curses. Alone rules Odin all this harm. So that between the children of kinswomen, runes of grievance were carried. At med sifjungum sak runar bar. In verse 34, Grógaldr pleads with his sister, claiming that she is out of her mind to cast such curses on her own brother. He proceeds to blame Odin for everything that has happened. It was the will of divine powers that things should pass by as they did. And Grógaldr continues, offering compensation to his sister in verse 35. Der byder broder, bauga rauda, vandilsve, och vigdali, haft du halfan heim, harmsat gjöldum, bruder baugvarid, och burir diner. As your brother, I offer you rings so red, all of one's shrine, and the valley of war. Take for yourself half of our realm to atone for your grief. You bride ring adorned, and for your sons. In verse 35, Dager offers compensation to Sigurðr for the loss of her husband. He offers red rings, a mysterious formula that keeps repeating itself in Edda poetry, and he offers a shrine of wands, Vandilsve, and a valley of woe, Vigdalr. To offer compensation to the grieving party after a murder was a common way of settling the matter. He offers to share with her and her sons half the inheritance after their father, and addresses her in flattering terms as the brudr baugvarid, the bride ring adorned. Sigrun kvad, sitka ek svåsæl, at sefa fjöllum, år ne of næter, at ek unali, nema at lidi loftungs, ljoma bregdi, renni und visa, vigblær þínig, gullbitli vaner, knega ek grami fagna. Sigurðr said, I shall not sit so happy on the mountain of souls, neither early nor at nights shall I desire life, unless on the troop of the highling shining light falls, and battle blow runs beneath the leader, with a gold bridle tamed, and I could receive the king. In verse 36, Sigurðr speaks of her grief. She claims to never desire life again. The only thing that makes life worth living is the sight of Helgi riding his horse battle blow, Vigblær, leading his retinue home so that she may receive the king. Svå haftig Helgi rädda görva, fjonder sina alla och fränder deira, sem fyr ulfi odar runni, geitra fjalli, geiska fullar. Sigurðr praises Helgi. Such had Helgi struck with terror all his enemies and their relatives, like when, before the wolf, running in ecstasy, goats off the mountain, full of terror. In verse 37, Sigurðr composes a memorial praise verse to her dead husband. She emphasizes his warlike skills and how his enemies would flee in terror like goats before a wolf. Så bar Helgi af Hildingum, sem iter skapader asker af þyrni, eða så dyr kalfur dögguslungin, effri fer öllum dyrum, och horn gloa vid himin sjálfan, Such was Helgi among the warriors, like a gloriously shaped ash among thorns, or like a stag calf drenched with dew, which stands out among all the beasts, and with horns glowing up to heaven itself. Och horn gloa vid Helgi In verse 38, Sigurðr continues to praise Helgi's memory, saying that Helgi, next to other warriors, was like an ash among thorns, and that he stood out like a stag calf among other beasts, horns glowing up to heaven itself and drenched with dew. It is tempting to wonder if such appraisal of a spouse in poetical terms could have been part of ancient memorial services, including the curses upon those who had caused the death of the beloved, and the elaboration of loss and grief. It might even have had a healing purpose. This sort of poetry is also found in the poems of Sigurðr, Helgi's younger half-brother, specifically in the Gudrun poem Gudrunar kvida in fyrsta, the first poem of Gudrun, verses 18 to 22. In this poem, Gudrun, who was married to Sigurðr, sits by the corpse of her beloved husband, who has also been killed by her own brothers, and she laments her loss and praises her dead husband in similar words, comparing him to other men, even to her own brothers, and also elaborating how she misses him and what a great loss this was for her. She too resorts to cursing her brothers for the grief they had caused on their own sister. There they found the Lady Gudrun ready to die. The young queen wept not like women are wont to do, but the grief was about to make her burst from inside. Many were the women and the men who tried to comfort the lady, many those who shared their own stories of grief and loss, but to no avail. In the first poem of Gudrun, the central theme is in fact to make the grieving widow come to terms with her loss and release her grief with tears, appraisal, and curses. The poem begins by describing how Gudrun hurts so much that she is unable to weep, and the other women come to join her and sit around the corpse with her. Each woman tells a tale of her own grief, as if sharing was part of the healing process. But the young widow is quiet, obviously about to burst from grief, and yet no tears will come. Finally, her older sister makes her remove the shroud that covers her husband's corpse and tells Gudrun to look at his face and take him in her arms like she used to do when he still lived. As the young woman embraces the corpse of her beloved, the sister recites a verse about how much they had loved each other, and this is when Gudrun finally breaks into tears of release. But then spoke Gulrand, Gudrun's sister, wise words of comfort. Look at Sigurd's beautiful face. Hold him like you did when he was still alive. Then ran the tears of the Niflunga queen, and shrieking her birds flew away. And only after weeping hard, so hard that birds flew from the ground, is Gudrun finally able to recite the memorial verses that she has composed for him, speak of how she feels, and also utter her curses. Such was my Sigurðr among the sons of Gjuki, like a green leek among dry weed. I thought myself greater among the Völsunga warriors than even Odin's maidens. Now I am tiny like a leaf in the grove. I miss him next to me in my seat, and I miss him in my bed, my friend with whom I could speak. Let us move on with the second poem of Helgi Hundingsbani. Prose interlude. Haugur var gjørd efter Helga, en han kom til Valhallar, då bød Odin honom öllu att råda med sig. A burial mound was raised after Helgi. Haugur var gjørd efter Helga. Haugur var gjørd efter Helga. And when he came to Valhalla, then Odin asked him to rule everything by his side. A prose interlude follows after verse 38. A haugur, a burial mound, was raised after Helgi in his memory. And when he came to Valhalla, Odin paid him a great honor. He, Odin, asked him, Helgi, to rule right next to himself. So Helgi was given the power to rule right next to Odin in Valhalla. This was, of course, a way for the skald to emphasize just how highly regarded Helgi was, even among the gods. So for some reason, the verse that follows, verse 39, suggests that Helgi, when given such power, immediately resorts to petty vengeance upon another resident of Valhalla, the deceased Hunding, the very man whose death gave Helgi his nickname Hundingsbani. Helgi kvad, du skald Hundinger, Fjålsvinnsmál, Fotlaug geka, och funa kinda, hundabinda, hästa gaga, gefa svinum sod, oder sofa gangar. Helgi said to Hunding, You shall, dogling, for every man prepare the footbath, and kindle the fire, bind the dogs, and herd the horses, give fodder to the swine, before you go to sleep. So it is as if killing him was not enough. He had to also humiliate Hunding in the afterlife, even as Hunding has been accepted as a warrior of Valhalla. Now that Helgi has arrived to rule in the hall, Hunding is commanded to do the work of slaves, bringing water for the footbaths of the warriors, and herding and feeding animals, and kindle the fire. Back in 1932, Finnur Jonsson commented upon this verse, suggesting that it must have been a much later addition, since Helgi's action here does not fit the otherwise noble and heroic portrait of him. Finnur Jonsson claimed that this was a common assumption by using the Danish term man, referring to people in general. Man har antaget, translated to English as one has assumed. And one has assumed, that is, people in general have assumed that this verse derives from an addition, since one believes that what Helgi here does to Hunding cannot fit into the noble, heroic portrait of Helgi otherwise. And this, Finnur says, is certainly correct. This assumption is correct, he says. I have to say that I sort of agree to a certain extent. I agree with Finnur that it feels wrong. It feels like an input from someone who did not appreciate the spiritual journey of growth that I think that the Helgi narratives convey. And this feeling may have caused me to unconsciously forget to add the verse in my previous recital of this poem. The recital that I keep playing for each verse in this episode. So I had to sort of read this verse anew. So Helgi's treatment of Hunding in the afterlife seems cruel, vindictive, sadistic, and very petty. It is entirely possible that this motive was added by some poet or scribe of such vindictive persuasion, and far more than the original authors of this narrative had ever imagined. But we do not know this. We do not know who composed the poem and how it may have been added to or censored before it got written down. It is also problematic to assume that 20th to 21st century feelings of right and wrong can be applied to narratives of the medieval period, a narrative that may reach back even further, well into the Iron Ages. However, for all we know, what Finnur Jonsson and I at least regard as Helgi's abuse of sudden power in the afterlife may have had consequences. For reasons otherwise unexplained, Helgi does not stay in Valhalla. He returns to his grave, moving back and forth between different afterlife realities, covered in bleeding wounds, needing the healing of his Valkyria. And after some time, he is reborn to live another life. Let us continue reading from the second poem of Helgi, Hundingsbani. Ambåt Sigurðr gekk aftan jo Haug I helga och så att Helgi reid till Haugsins med marga män. Sigurd's maidservant went in the evening about the mound of Helgi and saw that Helgi was riding to the burial mound with many men. Ambåt kvað. Hvort that svik ein ek sjå þykjunk, eða Ragnarök. Rida menn dauðir joa ydra, oddum køyrit, eða hildingum heimfør gefin. The maidservant said, "What is this sort of hallucination that I seem to be seeing? Or is it Ragnarök? You are dead men riding, and your steeds you are spurring. Or are the warriors given leave to come home?" For some reason, Sigurd's ambot wanders around the burial mound of Helgi in the evening. Ambot is a word that referred to a female slave or servant. Whether she was on the lookout for spirits or not, the ambot definitely had a vision. She saw the dead Helgi riding before a whole troop of dead men. She asks the dead man if she is having a svik, which means a betrayal, and in this context it means a betrayal of the eyes and the senses, namely an hallucination. If it is true, she thinks, it must be a sign of Ragnarök. Or, she adds, is it possible that the dead have been given leave to return to life? Helgi kvar, that svik ein, det du sjå fikkest, ne aldar rov, thott du oss liter, thott ver joa ora oddum køyrim, ne hildingum heimfør gefin. Helgi said to the maidservant, "It is not an hallucination, what you seem to be seeing, nor the destruction of the ages, though you can see us, though we, our steeds, are spurring on, nor have the warriors been given leave to come home." The dead Helgi replies to the ambot that it is not a svik, a betrayal of the senses. They are really here. But it is not the destruction of the ages, it is not Ragnarök, and no, they have not been given leave to return home to the world of the living. They are still dead, even if she can see them riding their horses. As we learn in the next verse, the dead Helgi has a message for his widow, Sigurðr. Heim gekk ambot och sagde Sigurðr. Ut gakk du, Sigurðr, fra Sefafjöllum, efdik folks jadar finna lyster. Upp haugerloken, Komen Helgi, Dolgspor drøyra, døglinger badvik, at du såredropa, svefja skulder, The maidservant went home and said to Sigurðr, "Out you should go, Sigurðr, from the mountain of souls, if you want to find the Lord of the people. The mound has been opened up. The holy has arrived. Enemy tracks are bleeding. The Deiling asked for you, that you, his wound drops, should heal. The ambot carries the message of the dead back home, urging Sigurðr to leave the Sefafjöll, the mountain of souls, to go and see Helgi's Haugur, his burial mound. For the Haugur, the mound, has been opened up. Helgi has arrived, the Fjålsvinnsmál, as in the protector of the people. This was a kenning for king. Besides, he has dolgspor, bleeding enemy tracks, as in bleeding wounds. He has asked his widow to still the wound drops, the sårdråpe, the flowing blood. Sigurðr gekk I haugen til Helga og kvað. Nu meg svåfegen fundi okrum, sem åtfräker Odins haukar, valvitu, varmare bråd, edda døggliter, dagsbrun sjå. Sigurðr went into Helgi's burial mound and said, "Now I am so happy to have found you, like the food-greedy hawks of Odin, when they know the dead, the hot pieces of flesh, or splattered with the red dew, see the day's edge, Sigurðr goes to the haugur of her dead husband and finds it opened, and he inside. She declares that she is happy, and strangely compares her happiness to the åtfräker, the food-greedy hawks of Odin. This was a kenning for ravens, which again could be a kenning for other vulture birds. In Old Norse poetry, any vulture or predator bird could be used to describe another, and by belonging to Odin, we know that she is speaking of ravens. And she, the Valkyria, is just as happy now as the ravens are when they see the dead, bloody corpses on a battlefield. She is as happy as vultures when they are drenched in blood come dawn. This is a very morbid image which reminds us that she is, after all, a Valkyria, a being who is said to roam the battlefield just like a vulture, to inspect the slain and choose which ones to bring home. Her desire for Helgi being compared to a vulture's desire for nourishment in the form of fresh bloody corpses. Her happiness like that of a satisfied vulture drenched in blood come dawn. These were probably perfectly acceptable comparisons back in the days. In the skaldic poem Fjålsvinnsmál, that we looked at in the first episode of this season, the Valkyria Poems, a Valkyria and a raven are walking the battlefield together, talking about the dead. And in the Völsunga saga, a Valkyria assumes the hide of a crow. In other lore, the Valkyriur wear swan hides. In any case, the Valkyriur have a connection to large birds, particularly swans and corvids. The purpose of this verse may have been to describe Sigurðr as more than a human woman, as a Valkyria, a battle goddess of the afterlife. As a Valkyria, she represents death, the afterlife, and like all other female powers of death and the afterlife, she is, in Norse poetry, described as taking pleasure in dead men. But it could also perhaps be a way of describing utter joy from a rather morbid viewpoint. It could also derive from a world where the poet most likely had been there, on a field of corpses after battle, and noted, like any observant poet would, just how ecstatically happy the birds were about all this carnage. And anyone who has fed birds abundantly, like I have, knows how happy birds get, how they flutter and jump and squeak with excitement when they realize just how much food they have before them. So, yeah. In the verse before, verse 42, the Ambot had given Sigurðr a message from her dead husband, namely that he asked for her to heal his bleeding wounds. In fact, he asked for her to svefja, to still, to stop, the sårdropa, the drops of wound, a kenning that would usually mean his blood flow from wounds, suggesting that his blood is still flowing despite being dead. After declaring how happy she is to see him in verse 43, Sigurðr proceeds to wonder exactly how to still a blood flow for a stiff corpse. Let us look at verse 44.
Fyrr vil ek kyssa konung olifan, enn du blodugri brynju kaster. Hår ditt Helgi, hälu þrungit, aller visi, valdögslägen, händer ursvalar, högna mågi. Hve skal ek der budelunger, dess bot of vinna. Sigurðr said, First I will kiss the king unliving. Before you the bloodied armor throw away. Your hair, Helgi, has been covered with frost. All over is the leader splattered with death dew. Your hands fully cold. Enclosures inlaw. How shall I, for you, noble one, be able to heal this boot of vinna?
In verse 44, Sigurðr declares that she will kiss the dead, as in the unliving, the oliftan king, before he throws away his bloodied armor. She observes how his hair is frosty, and that his body is slegin, splattered, covered with valdögg, the dew of the valor, the slain, the dead, which is a kenning for blood. His hands are completely cold. He is a corpse. How is she supposed to vinna bot, that is, win remedy, as in heal, this problem? He is long dead. But, as Helgi explains in the next verse, the problem is her incessant grief. She will not let him move on. Let us look at verse 45.
Helgi kvað. Ein velder du, Sigurðr, fra Sæfafjölum. Helgi harmdøgslegen. Græter du gullvarig, grimmum tårum, solbjørt, sudran, ådrer du sofa ganger. Vært feller blodukt og brjostgrami, ursvalt, innfjölgt, ekka þrungit. Helgi said, "You alone rules this, Sigurðr, from the mountain of souls. That Helgi is covered with grief dew. You weep, gold adorned, the tears of bitterness. Oh, sunbright, southern, before you go to sleep. Each tear falls like blood onto the king's chest. Cold, tearing, heavy with pain.
In verse 45, Helgi explains why he needs Sigurd's help. It is because of her intense grief and steady tear flow that he is hurting, that he cannot move on. He speaks lovingly to her, not blaming her, but explaining gently that her violent grief keeps him covered with harmdug, grief dew, a kenning for tears. He is covered in tears, and it hurts him. The term grief dew as a kenning for tears in this verse is based on an interpretation, namely that the original handwritten manuscript text meant to render harmdug, as Gudny Jonsson transcribed it. The medieval handwritten manuscript must have been a bit unclear and smudged in this part, since Finnur Jonsson had a different transcription. He transcribed the word he saw in the manuscript as hrædugr, corpse dew, which would then be a kenning for blood. As such, Helgi is hurting either because Sigurðr causes him to stay covered in blood, hrædugr, corpse dew, or because her tears cover him, the grief dew, the harmdug. So either Finnur Jonsson or Gudny Jonsson is right. We don't know that. The original manuscript is apparently a bit unclear whether it says harm or hræ. It's a handwritten manuscript and it's very old, so it could be either. Helgi calls her by flattering terms, gullvarid, gold adorned, just as her brother had called her baugvarid, ring adorned in verse 35, and also by typical Valkyria descriptions, sun bright, southern, solbjört, sudran. He explains that her bitter tears fall on his chest, his heart region, and that they feel heavy with pain, that they are cold and tearing or burning, innfjölgt. He needs her to stop weeping so much, and continues with a suggestion in verse 46.
Vel skulum drekka, dyrar veigar, Þótt mist hafim, munar og landa. Skal engi maður angerljud kveda, þótt mer og brjosti, benjare liti. Nu brudir, byrgdar I haugi. Nu brudir, byrgdar I haugi. Lofta diser, Hjå oss lidnum, lofta diser. Hjå oss lidnum, lofta diser. Well, should we drink the precious drink? Though we have lost both life joy and land. No man should sing angry songs of lament, though he sees my chest full of wounds. Now has the bride entered the burial mound. Nu du bruder, byrgdar I hauger. Nu du bruder, byrgdar I hauger. The high goddesses are with us, dead ones. The high goddesses are with us, dead ones. Lofta diser, hjå oss lidnum. Lofta diser, hjå oss lidnum. Lofta diser, lofta diser, lofta diser.
In verse 46, Helgi, it seems, declares that rather than staying put in grief and tears, they should celebrate. Though they have lost munur, that is love, vitality, joy in life, and also land, properties, although they have lost this, they should be drinking the dyrveiger, the precious drink. Why should they lament his wounds? Why should they be angry when there is cause for celebration? The bride has entered the hauger, the burial mound, and the elevated ones, the high goddesses, lofta diser, are with the departed. Good things are happening. As I have pointed out in my work, The Maiden with the Mead, the serving of a dyr, that is a precious, or helgir, a sacred, drink, veiger, or mead, mjöður, is a theme that repeats itself in Edda poetry. In the Håvamål, Odin describes how a Jötun woman, Gunnlöd, gave him a drink of the dyr mjöður, the precious meads. Gunnlöd merof gav, gullnomstoli å, drykkens dyra mjöder. Odin said, Gunnlöd gave me from the golden chair a drink of the precious mead. And later, Odin, in the same poem, Odin elaborates how he had this same mead when he hung on the world tree for 9 nights and received knowledge of runes, fate, and the powerful songs. Och ek dryck of gat ins dyra mjadar, ausin od räri. And I had a drink of the precious mead, poured from the cauldron, inspiration stir. The mead is the essence of poetry and divine wisdom. In the Fjålsvinnsmál, a visitor to the realm of the Jötun Gymir, who is identified as Ægir, the ocean lord, is invited into the hall of Gymir's daughter, Grógaldr, enclosure, and she offers him the mar mjöður, the adored mead. Innbydu han ganga I ockarens sal och dräcka in mära mjöd. Grógaldr enclosure said, bid him to walk into our hall and to drink the adored mead. And this mead is also known as the Fornsmjöður, the mead of the past, the ancient mead, served in the frosty chalice of death. Heil, vert du nu helder svein, og tak vid hrim kalki, full om Fornsmjöður. Be rather whole now, lad, and take by the frosty chalice full of ancient mead. In the Sigurðr a Valkyria called Sigurðr, who, according to the Grípisbó poem, has been sleeping since Helgi died. Well, she receives Helgi's younger half-brother Sigurðr, born after Helgi's death, and she offers him a horn full of mead, referred to as the minnisveigr, the drink of memory. She declares that it is filled with runes of power, greatness, fortune and pleasure, and also great songs. Hon tok då horn fullt mjödar och gav honom minnisveig. She then took a horn full of mead and gave him the memory drink. Sigurðr kvad. Bjorfär gikk der Brynethings apalder, Magni blanding och megen tiri. Fuller han ljoda och liken stafa, goda galdra och gaman runa. Victory Drift said, Ale I carry to you, armor Parliament's apple tree. It is filled with greatness and powerful symbols. Full is he of songs and favorable staves, good spell songs and runes of pleasure. In the Grimnismál, we learn that there is a particular she-goat in Valhalla, eating off the twigs of the world tree, and she produces the shining mead that never diminishes, and that Valkyriur carry and offer the ale which resurrects the Einherji, the warriors of Valhalla, every day. Heiderun heiter geit, stender höllu och biter av läråds limum. Skapker fylla, hon skall ins skira mjadar, knåa suveige vansk. Heidrun is that she-goat called who stands atop the hall and eats of the world tree's limbs. Large vessels she fills of the shining mead, so that drink never wanes. Hrist och mist, vi läck att mer horn bäri, där bära Einherjum öl. The Valkyriur I want to carry me the drinking horn, they carry ale to the Einherji. In the Hyndluljóð, the song of the she-wolf, the goddess Freyja asks a Jötun woman to carry the minnisaul, the ale of memory, to her guest, so that he may remember the divination and esoteric revelations that she has taught him. Freyja kvað, ver du minnisaul minum gesti, svo han ölmune, urdat tina, versa rävu och thridja morgni. Freyja said, carry the ale of memory to my guest, so that he may remember all your words from this speech on the third morning. When the Jötun woman refuses, Freya declares that he shall drink the dyrveiger, the precious drink, anyway, and all gods shall help him. Freya kvad. Han skal drekka dyrarveiger. Freya said, he shall drink the precious drink. We studied the Song of the She-Wolf, the Hyndluljóð, in the 3rd season of this deep diving series, episodes 20 to 28. We specifically went through the theme of the precious mead in episode 27, the precious mead. So, I will not repeat myself endlessly when it is possible to read my works on mead or just watch or re-watch episode 27. Suffice it to say that there are 2 important details in the mead serving stories that we should bear in mind. 1. The mead contains the powers of wisdom, knowledge, ancient lore, spell songs, and also resurrection after death. And 2. The mead is always served in a realm that has to be reached through a journey into another world. It is always described as a realm of death and afterlife, and also closely related to the world of the Jötnar. I have reached the conclusion that the mead is part of an initiation ceremony or experience where the hero attempts to reach a state of sublime, divine wisdom through a death journey, either to become a wise person or, say, a king. It may also be a consecration happening in the afterlife when a person has been chosen by the Valkyria. This seems to be Helgi's wish after death. Sigurðr bjoseng I haugenum. Sigurðr prepared her bed in the burial mound. Sigurðr kvað. Her hefi ek der Helgi hvilugörva, angerlausa mjök, ylfinga nider. Vil ek der I fadmi fylkir sofna, sem ek loftungi lífnum myndak. Sigurðr said, here I have for you, Helgi, prepared a resting place, very free from sorrow, O kinsman of the wolflings. I want you to sleep, warlord, in my embrace, as I once did with the living king, as I once did with the living king. In response to Helgi's request, Sigurðr prepares her bed in the mound and assures him that it is free from sorrow, angerlausa. Perhaps to reassure him after learning that her grief had been hurting his dead soul. She declares that she wants to sleep with him as if he was still alive. Since I last presented this verse in the previous episode, I have made a little change to the second half strophe. I first wrote, I want you to sleep, warlord, in my embrace, as I once did with the living king. Now I think it is more accurate to translate this as, I want to sleep, warlord, in your embrace, as I once with the hireling, the loftunger, could while alive. Helgi kvad. Nu kvedek enskis örvänt vera, sid nes nimma,
at sefa fjøllum. Du og armi oliftum sefer. Hvit I haugi, høgna dotter. Og du kvik inn konungborna. Helgi said, I say that now nothing is impossible. Late or soon at the mountain of souls. When you on the arm of the unliving sleeps, bright in the burial mound, the daughter of enclosure, and you are alive, the king-born maiden.
So Helgi declares that nothing is impossible now that Sigurðr, the bright Valkyria from the Mountain of Souls, the daughter of Høgni, the capable, the thinker, the enclosure, is sleeping in the arms of the dead. She provides brightness in the dark grave, and she is alive, the maiden who was born to a king.
Mål mer att rida, rodnar brauter. Låta fölvan jo, flugstig troda. Skal ek fyr vestan vindjalns bruar, oder salgåfner, Sigurðr veki. It is time for me to ride on the reddening path. Let the death-pale steed step on the flight ascending steep. I shall reach west of the wind helmet's bridges, before whole chanter wakes the victory people.
Sigurd's actions have evidently worked, for Helgi is finally ready to depart. He lets the Fjølvan jo, the deadly pale steed, step onto the flugstig, a steep for flying upwards. To ride a pale or cold steed was a very common poetical metaphor for dying and the afterlife journey. Helgi declares that he shall reach west of the bridges of the wind helmet, and that he shall do so very early, before the rooster of Valhalla wakes up the warriors, the Sigurðr, the victory people. The rooster is here called Salgåfner, meaning the hall chanter. It is clearly another cover name for Gullin Kambi, the rooster who, in the Völuspá, wakes the warriors of Valhalla at dawn, especially as Ragnarök draws near, and they must fight the powers of greed and hatred alongside the gods.
Der Helgi ridu leid sina, en der foru heim til bæjar. Annan aftan let Sigurðr ambåt halda vörd og hauginum. Helgi and his following rode away, and the women went home to the settlement. The next evening, Sigurðr let her maidservant guard the burial mound. En at dag setri, Sigurðr kom til haugsins, hon kvade. Komin væri nu, ef koma hygdi, Sigmundar burr, frå sølum Odins. Kvedek grams þínig, grænask vånir, og askelimum ernir sitja. och driver drottöl, draumthinga till. Och driver drottöl, draumthinga till. And by dawn, when Sigurðr came to the mound, she said, "He would have come now if he thought to come, the son of Sigmundr from Odin's halls. I think that hope is waning of seeing the king, when on the ash branches the eagles sit, og askelimum sitja, and drive the whole following of Helgi to the dream parliament, og driver drottöl, draumthinga til."
After this departure, Helgi does not return to haunt his burial mound anymore. He has truly moved on. Sigurðr lets her ambot guard the mound just in case, but nothing happens. In the morning, Sigurðr concludes that he is not going to come back from Odin's hall a second time. She refers to how the powers of death, symbolized as eagles seated in the branches of the ash being the world tree or the human body. Well, the eagle drive the entire retinue of dead men from the world of the living to the draumthinga, the dream parliament, another way of saying death.
Ambot kvad. Ver du eigi svo at ein farer, disse skjöldunga, draughusa til, verda öffelgari, allir og nøttum, daudir dolgar, mer enn dagar ljosa. The maidservant said, "Do not be so deluded that you travel alone, goddess of the shieldlings, to the corpse settlement. They become far more powerful all night long, the dead hostile ones, maiden, than in the bright day."
In the last verse of the second poem, the ambot warns Sigurðr from staying around the burial sites at night, since there are angry and hostile spirits roaming in the dark. She calls Sigurðr the goddess of the shieldlings, and the burial site the draughus, the corpse settlement. Actually, a draugur can also mean a sort of zombie. So it's like the ghost or settlement, or the settlement of the undead. It means the burial site.
Sigurðr vard skamliv av harmi och träga. Sigurðr was short-lived from grief and sorrow. Dat var trua I fornesku, at menn var I enderborner, en dat nu kallud Kärlingavilla. It was the belief in the old times that people were reincarnated. But that is now, in the 12th century, referred to as women's confusion. Helgi och Sigurðr kallat att vara enderborn. Helgi och Sigurðr kallat att vara enderborn. Helgi and Sigurðr are said to have been reincarnated. Helgi och Sigurðr kallat att vara enderborn. Helgi och Sigurðr kallat att vara enderborn. Helgi och Sigurðr kallat att vara enderborn. Het han då Helgi Hundingsbani, en hon Kåra halvdanardotter, så som kvädigt i Grógaldr, och var hon Valkyria. He was then called Helgi Hundingsbani, and she was Kåra Halfdan's daughter, as it is sung in the song of Kåra, and she was a Valkyria.
The final verse is followed by a prose interlude by the medieval scribes who recorded the poems in the Codex Regius manuscript. They kept stressing the theme of reincarnation as something the pagans believed in. The idea of reincarnation is now, they add, and by now they are of course referring to their own era, the Christian Middle Ages, the 12th century, the 1100s. So now, they say, that is at this time, the notion of reincarnation was only regarded, by Christian scribes at least, as the villa, the confusion, of kärlingar, older women. However, they add, both Helgi and Sigurðr are said to have been enderborn, reincarnated. The scribes even specify the next lifetimes counted. Helgi was reborn as a third Helgi, the Hundingsbani, Hudding's damager. Hudding means someone with a strong hair growth. Sigurðr, who had been reincarnated after Svåfa, was reincarnated as the Valkyria Kåra, and there was even a song about them, the Grógaldr, the Song of Kåra. And this poem was obviously known to the scribes in the 12th century. Sadly, this poem and the narrative it was based on have been lost to posterity. A few pages had been torn out of the only surviving manuscript, and we may assume that the poem was related in one of the older manuscripts that disappeared, and that it was either not included in the one we have left, or else been written on the torn out pages of the one we have left. So they were either torn out or just not added in the one manuscript that survived for posterity. There were several of them. Interestingly, however, the Völsunga saga continues with a narrative about the last Völsungar, and so do the Edda poems that were based on the same narrative, and these we do have available in the surviving manuscript. After Helgi Hundingsbani dies, his half-brother, Sigurðr, gets involved in the Game of Thrones that followed Helgi's death, and is ultimately killed by Borghildr, their father's wife and Helgi's mother. Helgi's and Sigurðr's father, Sigmundur Völsungur, is unable to stay married with the woman who killed his firstborn son, and now moves south to Valand or Frankland, where he marries a princess called Hjørdis. They have a son, Sigurðr. After Sigurðr's birth, Sigmundr Vølsungur is killed in battle against the Huns, who historically invaded this region of Europe, Frankland, during the 4th century. His widow, Hjørdis, flees Frankland with her little son and resurfaces in Denmark, where she marries a prince and where the last Vølsunga prince, Sigurðr Fáfnisbani, grows up. Sigurðr Fáfnisbani, Helgi's half-brother, born after Helgi's death, sets out on a journey which leads to the top of a sacred mountain, where he has to wake up his Valkyria, Sigurdrifa. And in one of the Edda poems which cover this entire narrative, the Gripisbå, we learn that the Valkyria has been sleeping ever since Helgi died. It is as if the theme of reincarnation is subtly alluded to in poetry, not just by the medieval scribes, but layered as deeper meanings in the poems themselves. The story of Sigurðr Fáfnisbani is the next upcoming narrative that we are going to look at in the deep diving series. This was all for this episode. In the next, we are going to have a look at the possible spiritual journey interpretation of the Helgi Hundingsbani narrative.
Well, should we drink the precious drink? Though we have lost both life joy and land. No man should sing angry songs of lament, though he sees my chest full of wounds. Now has the bride entered the burial mound. Nu du bruder, byrgdar I Helgi. Nu du bruder, byrgdar I Helgi. The high goddesses are with us, dead ones. The high goddesses are with us, dead ones. Lofta diser, jo oss liv. Lofta diser, jo oss liv. Lofta diser. Lofta diser.